Hey, everybody, welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today we've got Lisa Princic on the show. Lisa, welcome.
Hey, Chris, it's so great to have to be here. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
Great. Yeah, it's been it's sunny here, and that's always a good thing when you live in the west coast of Canada in the mountains. So yeah.
Wait, remind me again what the town is called, because I know we talked about this when I was on your show, but I forgot.
Yeah,
I forgot the name.
it's called Squamish, BC.
Squamish. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little town between like the big ski resort of Whistler and Vancouver, which is kind of a large city in our
huge.
country. Yeah, so we're kind of tucked away, but we've become very popular in the last 5 years. So it's not quite as away as it could be, but
yeah, I think more and more people are finding that it's harder to find those little places. I mean, even my parents, my dad's from India. There's a place called Goa, which has become super commercialized, and like everyone goes there. And it's no longer what it used to be 30 years ago, let's just say.
Well, and the opening of the internet world, where it used to be like follow guidebooks and talk
Lonely
to other
Planet.
travelers, is all pretty big knowledge now. And so it's like, yeah, it is hard, especially in COVID when you're trying to stay away from people and you have more space and everyone wants to flock to the outdoors and you happen to be in the outdoors and that's where everyone's coming. It's like,
that's funny because Denver, Colorado, I was guilty of doing that last year and now I moved here. So
there you go.
Perfect example of like, oh, let's go social distance in the mountains. And oh, this is actually really crowded because everyone's here. So great to have you, Lisa. And I'll let you introduce yourself because you're going to say a lot better than I will. So who is Lisa?
Okay, so I am a business strategist, and I would say I've been calling myself that for about 6 years. I would say that I started out as a business or a life coach, and then kind of moved myself towards business as I knew that was the stuff that lit me up. And entrepreneurship in general is like I've just always been fascinated, intrigued, and really believed in it for almost. Even for like an aspect of social change, like when we work for ourselves, we are able to make our own choices, live our values, and that just, I think, makes the world a better place.
Yes.
So yeah, the strategy part is I mostly help online business owners, so service providers, and that could be anyone coming from a traditional profession, like into the financial world or like law or anything, move towards creating services and packages and really like irresistible offers that they are selling mostly through people finding them somehow online or even coming across their website because they are showing up in a local search, and then having that transformation that they are offering through this package or through this service to be very clear about where they're getting people and communicated really, really well, so that they can sell more easily and actually just do the work that they're more designed to do versus being like a Jack or Jill of all trades, but actually offering something that's very clear and gets more repeatable. And then, of course, when you start to get repeatable results, that's when you can look at scaling.
Definitely. And you are also the host of the Scaling Deep podcast, which, of course, scaling, very relative or relevant topic.
But deeply.
Yes, so, deeply is the key word there, not scaling widely.
Yeah. And so that's part of it. So, I mean, it's an interesting combination of, yes, we're growth oriented, right? Like humans are wired to evolve and to grow and to want more and to figure it all out. But more doesn't always have to mean like broad. It doesn't always have to mean like more things. It could just be like greater depth and deeper meaning and more fulfillment. And so while we are all kind of driven in one way or another, just like what's next and what could I have more of, we're also not able to sustain that. Is it even have any meaning to us or fulfillment? So how do we do that in a way that is still allowing us to like deepen our experience and give more value? Like growth can also be about giving better results to people or being more of an expert in one thing. It doesn't have to be like all in terms of revenue. It doesn't have to be in terms of volume. There's different ways to grow.
Yeah. And I like what you said there. You don't want people to be a Jack or Jill of all trades, because you've heard it before. We've all heard it before. Jack of all trades, master of none. But it's not until you get shiny object syndrome and you go through that and you realize, wait a second, I heard this in like third grade that jack of all trades, master of none. Now I know what it means, because if you're doing a little bit here and there and you're dabbling, you're not going to become an expert in anything because you're not going deep enough. So it's better to go a mile deep instead of a mile wide, because otherwise you're just at the surface of all those different things.
Well, totally. And the thing with entrepreneurship online is that you're not the person in town necessarily doing the one person in, like, say if you're in a small town or on a small neighborhood and you're the go-to person for this thing, you serve everyone. But when you start to transition online, you can and you will grow better by attracting the ideal client, the ideal person. So they get the result, and then they shout from the rooftops about how great it was to work with you because they got that result. Now, you could sell that same thing to like 20 people, but if they weren't ready for that transformation, then they're not going to be the super fans, and then you won't grow as easily. So when we're growing online, it is more, it's a better idea to get more clear on, to get more narrow so that you are more clear on what you're selling and to whom. And that's kind of when it becomes more of a business than a service provider. And a service provider does this thing. It's like a coach or a realtor. Like, you can be a realtor that just does real estate or a lawyer that just does law, or you can specialize as like, I actually get really good results in this one area. And then that is when, because people don't want to hire just someone to take care of things. They're not willing to pay premium pricing for someone to just take care of things. But if they really want an outcome, they will pick the person who they most trust to get that outcome, and they will also pay more for it.
That's so true. And I mean, I do that all the time. I go on Google Maps and I'm like, I want this thing. Who has the best reviews and is closest to me? And usually it's a no-brainer. I'm like, okay, these are the top 3 choices. That's where I'm going to go. Perfect example yesterday was I just moved to Denver, so we have one car here. So I'm borrowing the girlfriend's car while I figure out the logistics of bringing mine from Texas. And so I had the car for the day, and I had to go pick her up from her place of work right now, because I'm like the home entrepreneur guy. I just do whatever I want during the day, which is cool. It's cool. She likes going to the job. It's great. But she was hungry and she was tired because we went hiking all weekend, and she didn't want to cook. And I was like, well, I don't want to cook. Let's find a healthy meal prep place. And we literally drove 15 minutes away, and I spent like $120 to buy a bunch of meals for the rest of the week. And that's a perfect example of that person had that service, and they were very specific on what I was looking for. I didn't want to go to some generic place and piece things together. I wanted it to be done for me. So for those listening, make sure to go very deep and become that expert in that thing. And I took it a little personally with the realtor thing, because I'm like the real estate agent, and I am not super specific. I totally know that, but this is great advice for me as well, because if you do get all the clients, I mean, sure, they might be happy you did an okay job for them, but you didn't deliver that exact result they were looking for, maybe because you didn't even really define what the expectations were up front. So
well, I totally think too, it's about attracting people. So like if you're going to get a referral, you're going to get, I mean, so I said, I was mostly talking about online, but even with referrals, like when somebody is like, who do you know that? Like, you're only going to get people who do like raving results. Someone's going to say, yeah, I worked with so-and-so, but it wasn't that great. Like, we didn't have the best experience. Everyone. So sometimes it's like, just because they weren't the ideal client doesn't mean that you didn't do a good job. It means that they weren't looking for quite the result, or they weren't as committed to the result. It's like letting someone in here. You're like, I'm not sure if they're really ready to be a client. And then you let them in anyway, and then it doesn't go as well, and you don't feel as good, and they don't feel as great because they really weren't ready for the service you offered. And yet 9 other of the 10 people you worked with were like, this is the best thing ever.
Yes.
So sometimes by being more clear on the results we plan to get qualifies people, and then everyone's happy, and then you feel better. And then that word spreads rather than someone saying, well, I worked with so-and-so, it wasn't that great.
Exactly. And then that goes back to as well setting the expectations up front, because if you kind of don't set those and you don't really have them, because you're kind of just like, well, I'm going to get this thing for you, but you don't tell them what to expect. they're not sure, even when you do an amazing job at the end, they're like, wait, I thought I was going to get A, B, and C, when really that wasn't even part of the package. So
Yeah.
it just depends on, for those listening, like whatever industry you're in, make sure you're very clear, let people know up front the expectations, because that way you're like, hey, we said we were going to do A, B, and C, boom, knocked it out of the park. And they're happy too, because they knew ahead of time, oh, that's what the result, that's how we would define success in this situation, instead of kind of like getting there and wondering like, well, did I really get what I want? What did I expect versus what I got, you know?
Right. And so then when you start to look at scaling, so there's two major ways for service providers. And one is the agency model. And so for in your case as a realtor who wants to then build a team of realtors, that would be more of an agency model. And then for others, it's that one-to-many model. So you could be a realtor and start selling courses on how to get your first X amount of clients or how to do these kinds of deals. And it doesn't have to be official. Like I know there's like in some of our professions, there's like more accreditation bodies that do training. But what if someone's like, sure, I'd pay $500 for that to get, or how to do your social media as a realtor, or the extras. And then you can actually begin to sell those because you become someone who sells in a certain way, a certain thing to a certain kind of person. And you're teaching people now about that. And that's again about scalability. So even though we don't all want to necessarily scale and grow, some people are just happy doing one-on-one work because it flows, it's consistent, we get good at it. It means that you're still so whether or not you actually decide to go on that one of those two routes isn't the point. It's like, if you're at the point where you could do that, it means you've reached a level of consistency and flow, which is a really nice place to be in, rather than feeling like, is there going to be a famine next month?
Yeah.
Which nobody really wants to experience. So they both of those goals you still need the same circumstances to get to either scaling or consistency. And it's a really better place to operate than hustling. Like I like to live in a hustle-free world.
Yes. I love that.
I think there's shortcuts to hustle, and the shortcut to hustle is being very clear on your value proposition. Like, what is it that you offer? And so you don't have to explain over and over again, oh, I could do this, but then I could do that. And I also could do that, and have like 100 pieces of content, all addressing all these different things. Why not just get the yeses the moment they land on your website from the right people, and they don't even look elsewhere. They're like, I'm stopped. Like, this is it. You're the one. And then you're gaining every one of those sales so fast, rather than having maybe even more people come, but more people turn away. It's just way easier because driving traffic is hard. Like getting those leads, getting those new referrals, all that is the hardest part. It's not keeping clients, it's gaining clients or even people to find out about us in the first place. So that's the proper positioning, and a strong value proposition takes that part and makes it easier and makes it less time intensive.
Yeah, because the first sale is always the hardest. I think I remember hearing it somewhere that, hey, the fastest way to make money, go to someone who's bought from you and sell them something new, or, you know, a different complementary service or product, because you've already overcome that hurdle of that first sale, which is the most difficult. And so if you are the expert for that thing and people land on your page, they're like, oh, why would I go anywhere else? This is like the top Google search. This has everything. It answers all my questions. I found basically like the Google review. For those who go off of Google SEO, I think a lot of people, I don't know if anyone uses anything other than Google much, but like if it's at the top 3, no one ever really goes to page 2 or 3 of Google, right? That's where things go to die, I'd say, like 3 and beyond.
Yes. Okay. Yes and no, but I'm going to argue this just a slight bit, just because of an experience that I've had where, yes, I was higher on Google. There was because I actually was found a lot on Google as a business coach.
Okay.
And which was not a lot of people who I know who are in the field I'm in actually get found that way, but I did. And part of it was just I'd had a website up for so long, and I kept it fresh with content. And Google loves a long blog post once in a while, and I did that for years. And but here's the difference. The difference was that a lot of people would get searched, but it depends what you're in. Like if you're talking about, yes, a restaurant, like you're making $150 decision, and it's not a huge emotional decision. Like it's not like purchasing from someone like a lawyer or a retailer or a coach, you kind of have to you want to like them. Like you've got to develop a connection. You sure, like you need to know this food is good, but you don't have to have as much investment. So for service providers, you've got to create trust. So you can be top search, but you will be toply left too if you are not connecting. And so what I found was a huge turning point for me in my business was having website copy and like messaging that resonated and had them say, you got inside my head. You were speaking to me. And that's why I hired you. Because having someone hire a stranger that they've Google searched on a term for a fair bit of money, like it's a higher investment, is pretty rare. But if you connect and they trust you and they get that feel for you right away, and you talk about their problems the way they see them, and no one else is doing that. I wasn't number one. I was probably on the first page still, but I still today, now I'm not, because I changed my brand and that somehow changed things like my URL. So whatever.
There's a bunch of
still
like
am sometimes on the second
SEO.
and third page, and people find me and they hire me because my messaging resonates and none of the others do. So it's a huge differentiator. It's a huge way to differentiate without actually having to do something repetitively. You just really have to hone in on it, maybe update it a few times until it gets closer. Because I had some versions of it over like a 6 to 12 month period and then it got stronger and stronger. And then it didn't relatively change because I kind of nailed it and realized that people still say, oh my God, I want my website to sound like yours. And so I think that's a really critical point of differentiation that, again, is hustle free, because once you get clear on your messaging and your value proposition and your positioning and why you're right for some people and what's going on for them and how you can solve that problem for them, you do that once and you get more value over and over again from it.
Exactly. That's really powerful. And I mean, one thing that I found to be helpful, I'm sure this is the case with you as well, is that audio and video just does such a great job for letting people, if they come into your web of content and they like what they hear and they stick around. I mean, I'm guilty of this too. I'm going in May to an event in Oregon for a guy's podcast who I've been listening to forever. And I spent $3,000 on the ticket. I was like, oh, I want to go to that thing. Yeah, I was like, I want to go to that thing. There's real estate people, investors, and real estate agents. Like, that's going to get me to the next level. Never met this guy, followed him on Instagram. He doesn't even have a huge following, but I've learned so much from the free content that I'm like, I've already gotten more than the $3,000 in value from the free stuff. I can't imagine what I'm going to get if I pay to get in this room. So that's a perfect example of listening to someone who, again, I mean, not a huge following, not like a Ty Lopez or Grant Cardone type of person, but someone just like you and I who happens to be a CEO of like a internet, company. So perfect example. I mean, you don't have to be on page one. You don't have to be top 3. You can still make an impact on others. Yeah.
Like, so visibility projects is kind of what I like to look at it as, because it's like, to me, it's like this like effort to build a resource in one place at a time versus like little tidbits on all these different channels that don't really, you're not there consistently enough to actually like develop a relationship, even though the people you may not know who they are. They know who you are. And some of them you'll get to know, but the idea is that you're creating a relationship. And if you're just if you're like a tiny bit in all these different places, it's really not fostering a relationship. So when I talk about a visibility project with my clients, it's like, where do you want to show up consistently and create value?
Yes.
And start to create a relationship. Now, podcast is an example of that. Really showing up on one channel, like Instagram, for example, but like not just putting out a post or 2 a week, but like DMing people and paying attention to the people who you want to create relationships with and experimenting with your content. So yeah, some of it would be video, but like really owning that's like would be a project that sure, it might become the system later, but you're treating it like a project. So you get to a point with it where it's working versus just like thinking you just need to do like, oh, post here, post there, post there, and then leave. That's not going to get as far as owning one of those places and really feeling like you're like, I came, conquered, I left, like going to a conference where you're like, okay, I learned, I networked a bunch of people and I will follow up with a bunch of people. That's like a project in a way.
Yeah.
So I would approach it that way. And obviously if someone is buying a ticket like that, that person has done a really great job to create that relationship. They've provided consistent content that you're interested in, and you responded with that. So that's a great place for them. And they don't need to do that in 100 places necessarily.
Right. Because I mean, that's a perfect example is I might have followed him on Instagram and the podcast, but like they do have a YouTube channel. I don't really follow that. I don't look around. I think we're friends on Facebook now, but kind of because I bought my way into that friendship, I'm like, oh, I want this guy to be a mentor. Let me buy his ticket. Now he has to add me on Facebook, right?
I love that. I bought my way into his friendship. And that's actually another not bad idea when it comes to relationship building.
If you want to be friends with someone, buy their $3,000 product, great way to foster a relationship. And I know a lot of people offer like, oh, can I buy you coffee and pick your brain? That's a relatively low ticket item. So that's just a way to stand out a little bit more. But we kind of talked about scaling deep as well, even on the platform, because if you're just doing a little bit on everything and just sprinkling your post out and automating it and just putting the same thing on 5 platforms, which I also kind of do sometimes. I try to tailor it for the platform, but sometimes it's like, okay, pump it in, go to the next episode. It's not going to be as impactful as if you're sitting there DMing, engaging, replying to comments genuinely and authentically, instead of having a VA who doesn't speak 100% your language, like commenting back and people can tell it's not real.
Yeah, I'd say most people who are doing it properly, even really big businesses I mean like personal brands they're still doing their own DMs. Like most people aren't doing that because
they want it to be their voice.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we talked about like, that is really the strategic approach to business as opposed to the kind of tactical approach. And, I think when we take things from the top down versus the bottom up, like, oh, I do all these things, how do I do it strategically or save more time? I mean, I think that if it was kind of the wrong way to look at it, then like, what is the main goal I have? And then what are the most likely milestones that are going to show me that I'm reaching my goal? Like what, and then how do I put those into a system on a regular, like how do I put those activities into a system so that you can analyze enough what is working and what's not working? Because I don't, like, we have to be profitable. And if we're spending all our time on marketing and we're, day in, day out, like creating content, posting content, and we're not making a huge amount of profit because that starts to add up, then we're not really running a really sustainable business. And if we actually can say, well, actually this channel is doing this for me, this channel is doing that, like I would prefer someone to double down on a channel that's working for them and actually bringing them in people than just like, I hope this is going to work. Like at some point we need to take a critical analysis and say, if we're not the 8-figure business owner, 7, but who knows, even that, like we don't necessarily can't have a team on every single channel. Like we have to be figuring out like which one is going to work and letting it go. Like I think I tried, like Twitter, I hadn't been on in like years. And I think I put a couple things on there like a few months ago. And then I was just like, we're talking like never go on there. And I don't really think that Pinterest, I think again, like 8 years ago, I think I dabbled on it more for personal. And then I haven't even looked at it and I haven't even clicked on anyone else's Pinterest for anything. So it's kind of like, there are really so many ways to find information. We do not need to be on all the places because for whatever I can't find on Pinterest, it'll be on a blog post somewhere that is easily searchable. So it's like, we really don't have to be on all these places. We just have to be nurturing a place where people show up. I had one person say, well, if you ever get on YouTube, let me know because I consume all my content on YouTube versus podcasts. Right. And I'm like, well, like for every person who says that, someone will say, I don't really watch YouTube, but I'll listen to podcasts. Right. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I guess it can be, I do see some of the people, like you mentioned, the super successful personal brands, they have every single platform. They're on all the podcasts and YouTube as well. And it can be nice because sometimes, and I do the YouTube video as well. I just post the footage. And sometimes people will be like, I came here to YouTube to leave a comment, or like, I wanted to see this one in video, or to have the option to switch vice versa. But if people really love what you do and they want to consume your content, I mean, the value's there. They're going to find a way to do so. And so I do agree that, sure, maybe that one person who prefers YouTube may not listen to the podcast as much, but like you mentioned, there's going to be others who do listen to that. And I mean, really, that's who you're speaking to. So that is your audience, and that's who you should focus on.
I mean, yeah. And it's, there's a lot of people who you can't, like, there's a lot of business owners where most of their audience is on a number of places. It's not like, well, here's your audience. And, you know, if your audience is like a certain age group and it's like within a 10-year range, for sure, you might want to choose the platform. Or if you're a career professional and you, like, I have a client and like she's a full-time like pharmacist in a specific field, and she connects to her group on LinkedIn. And that's where her other people in jobs in this certain field or wanting to get in this field are going to be, and they are going to be there. So it means that when she's posting organic stuff, she gets a lot of responses, a lot, because she's the only one posting services for those kinds of people. And so it makes a lot of sense, but most people have options. And, you know, trust, if you're seeing people on like 5 or 6 or 7 different platforms and they're established business owners, they know it's because they're at that point where they're getting their return on investment for it. It's not because they're just like feeling they have to. They're actually, it's worth the team that they have to help them do it. And they're making more from it than they are spending on it. It's more about when we're at the point where we're like putting all this time and energy into the marketing and we're like, do I even get a return? Like, I've given this a good chunk of time and something else is working actually better. Why am I still doing this? Because it's like you could spend all your time marketing, or you're paying a lot of money out to a team to do it. And it's like, it's not really the thing that's bringing in clients. So, I just want people to pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I mean, you really do live that, because I think on the Calendly booking link, like I have a little field that's like, please provide your YouTube channel if you have one. And you're like, I barely use it. That's all you said. And so you didn't even give me the channel, but that is perfect because you're not trying to cater to that audience that you're not really fostering at the moment. It's like, podcasting is your chosen platform.
It's my place, right? Yes. And there's enough people out there listening to podcasts. I mean, a lot of people listen to podcasts like crazy, and it's also just more where it's easier for me, like doing I mean, gosh, solo episodes. Like, it's really important for me to put out solo episodes. So, like, I do a lot of edits on my solo episodes. That's not YouTube friendly. Like, I can't edit every 5 seconds because I'm changing my mind as I'm speaking, because I tend to be more of a stream of conscious. Like, I don't really script out and plan. And then I can't imagine even doing that on YouTube on a solo for like a 25-minute solo where I'm reading something. So it just isn't the right content. So, then you think, okay, well then what is it? I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get a show going on Clubhouse, because to me, it's like, I'm a wing it person. I really show up well, impromptu. That's one of my superpowers. It's like, I excel in that, whereas I'm not that great at prep and plan.
Same.
So that's why I've listened to my superpowers and I follow that in my business. And so I can't wait to do something like that is like, I get to meet people in time and live and have a conversation, because I actually do better when I find out the details, because I'm good at personalized stuff. Again, that's going deep and going to the truth. And the truth is always found in the questions, not in the one size fits all frameworks. So I'm excited to, experiment with that. And I'm also excited that, but while YouTube would take a way more production time prep and work, and it would be even more than a podcast, Clubhouse would probably be 1/3 of the time to do the same amount of hour output.
That's so true. And I guess I struggle with this as well, as there's so many things to do. How do you measure? Do you have any advice or tips for developing those measurables? Do you kind of just pick a few, like, hey, these are the 3 things I think we should focus on. Let's measure them somehow. And then also, do you have a system that you recommend for measuring them? Just like Excel, does that work?
Yeah. So I created this little tool called the Scaling Deep Marketing Roadmap. And I think it's like $27 if you get it through the deadline funnel timer, or then it goes to $47
before the countdown. Yeah.
And it's a really simple tool. And actually that goes along nicely with my Brave messaging toolkit, which does help people create that copywriting. And which, again, I think that's $97 right now. I mean, these are really, really low price, but they're not simple do it in 5 minutes programs. They're like, take it seriously, but they're cheap because I just want everyone to have them. And the scaling deep marketing roadmap really is just more like an exercise of like, here's what a marketing funnel looks like. Like, this is actually why, it's like this pyramid, and here's what it does for you. And here's the point. And I would say that the most important question to look at in it is like, where's the block in your funnel? So are you not selling with the people who are getting on calls with? That's kind of the number one place that I look. Are you not getting anyone onto the sales calls in the first place? Or are you getting no traffic? So it's like everyone has different like new leads. So like, what is your biggest bottleneck or problem area? I mean, I always start with sales, because I'd say that selling, if you're not selling to people who are actually ready to buy from you, then like, what is the issue there? I would look there first. And then that could be also a pre-qualifying question. And then, so just like that, so that can be like a deeper reflection. So when I have people who sign up for a consult on my website, because I have people who sign up for a consult for my personal, like my customized private work, and I'll ask them, where you heard from me? Like, where did you hear about me? And that tells me like, wow, I still have a lot of I'm buying now from you. When can we start? Like dream clients still find me from Google.
Cool.
And a couple recently from ads, like Facebook ads that I've been running for different things and minor things. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. No one's ever said, saw you on Instagram. So again, that's telling. And that's also probably because I don't love showing up on Instagram. So there's part of this, like, where are people finding me naturally? What is working already well? Because it probably means there's some kind of synergy between your desires, your personality, your skills that are causing you to show up in that place. And then what do you like? Because you can't also really force yourself to do something that
you don't like.
It feels flat and it's not working. So it's like,
right.
It's one thing to say like, I'm going to conquer Instagram and I can't wait to do reels and stories every day. Like that will probably end up working for you. It's just that because I don't have that desire, I'm not seeing them. And I'm also not feeling super energized. And I have some people who I pay attention to. I've got like, it's more like my colleagues. It's like all my colleagues I know what's going on with, and they inspire me. So I don't mind checking in on that, but I don't want to be posted a lot all day. So I think like it's partly that two-way reflection. And then, for the longest time, I kept track of where are my leads coming in on a spreadsheet. And now I kind of just mostly know I can pay attention enough in my head to know, and I've thought about it strategically enough to know like what's working. There's also things that you can't always, you can't know for sure. Like podcasting is challenging. Like,
like who's in your audience?
Nobody says to me, I found you through my podcast, but I also know that when they do find me, they often will check me out first on the podcast before they book the consult or they decide. So I think like that's one of those things that I do believe that having a middle section of that awareness, like they heard about you in the first place. So people will be hearing about me through this podcast with you. So that's visibility. That means like I'm reaching people through your podcast that have never heard of me, would never know I existed if I wasn't on this podcast. That's visible. That's like awareness. Engagement is people who show up on my podcast and are like, oh, I heard about this podcast somehow. I'm going to check, or I heard about you. I'm going to check you out. So that's that middle of the funnel. It's harder to track, but at least we're giving them a chance to have something to consume. And so that I just think is a given. I think everyone who wants to grow online has to have content.
Yes. And
then the final is the sales. Like, where are people finding me? And is my sales function working? Like, are they signing up for consults for my website? Yes. Are most of them booking with me? Yes. That means that part is working well.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of just understanding it. And then you can sometimes track it in your head, sometimes a spreadsheet, but then it's just like looking at it and going, well, what is this telling me that I can do more of, that I need to do more of? And what's this telling me that I probably don't need to do?
Yeah, no, I love that, because you said a lot of great things there. I just flipped the page, but I've been jotting some notes down, and obviously, where did you hear from me is such an important question that a lot of people don't even ask. They're just like, yeah, okay, you want to book a call, or you booked a call. Awesome. What do you want to do? Like, here's my service, without asking that question. Because then you don't really know. Do they come from your podcast? Do they see a post on Instagram? There's no way of knowing what do I need to focus on more. So asking that simple question is really key for being able to start tracking. And this is actually something I learned with a previous real estate team that I worked with, where they always had the lead source in the CRM, and they put, referral lead or lead source, like where did they come from? Was it Facebook, Google? Some companies are better at this than others. Like, how did you hear about this, on the little intake form? And that way they know where to focus their efforts. So for those listening, if you don't have some sort of intake form or like 2-question questionnaire, that could be very helpful, and make sure that's one of the questions on there.
And even when you get on a call, sometimes double checking, like, are you sure you found me? Like, you're across and down another country from me. Like, so how did you, but then people say, well, I looked up business strategist for women entrepreneurs or something like that. So their term got me from New York to my little town on the west coast of Canada. So, and then the other thing is that application form, it's not quite, it's like the consult form, does pre-qualify people. And it does let, like, a lot of people won't fill that out if they're not serious. Mm-hmm. And I had one person fill it out, and like, I recently, well, a few months ago, and through his answers, and then through looking at his website, because I don't want to ask a lot of questions. It's not for us. It's kind of for them. It's a little bit for us. So like, I don't ask a lot of things. I'm like, name, website, email, like, what are your goals? What's getting in your way, kind of thing. Where did you hear from me? And where can I find you online? So anyways, I tried out his brand, and I saw his answers. His answers were so vague. I like, you didn't really look at my services, did you? And then I realized that I had a blog posts where people were finding it somehow through a search that wasn't really attracting ideal people. And it linked to the consult right away without going to my coaching page first, which actually lists my prices and services. And then I was like, because I do want people to see the prices first. Like, I just wanted people to like, yep, this is a great deal. I mean, some people will be like, this is amazing, I'm going to go for it. And other people are like, wow, I never even knew, like, because I don't want to be on the call with a half an hour with a person who's like, what? Like, I thought I would be paying you like a few $100s.
Exactly. And so now, did you redirect the traffic to that page you said, so that they can see the prices first? You go straight to my, here's how I can work with you page, because that pre-qualification step created more success for me. Yes.
Like, I want
ideal clients.
I want positive energy around me. Like, I don't want to bring in people who ghost me. Like, I had this other couple a year or so ago. And again, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I thought that they would, and we spent a lot of time on the phone, like maybe 45 minutes. I don't know, and then they ended up, like, I could tell when I said my pricing, which was actually quite a lot less than now, they had no clue. And they were like shocked. And I think
that was a deal breaker for them.
And I'm like, wow, like there's no point. Like, they ghosted me. They never even got back to me. And it's like, that doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. And many people on the call, or listening to the show right now, they probably have been there. I've been there for sure, where anyone who wanted to work with me, yeah, let's go. Okay, I got a lead on a phone call. You got some properties you want me to sell? Okay, let's do it. And literally, I was just sharing this example with someone. I took this property without even qualifying the guy, without asking questions, because he had 10 houses that he wanted to sell.
Wow.
After selling 3 and dealing with this guy, like, way more than I expected. Of course, I had given him a little bit of a discount on the commission because it was a bulk deal, like little things here and there. Like, I gave an inch, he took an arm, and just, I couldn't stand him. And so, negative energy for sure. Every time I'd get on the phone call, I'm like, hey, how's it going today? He's like, oh, you tell me, like, how's it going? Like, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm usually so positive and optimistic. And this guy, I was just drained every time I took his phone call. And that was an example of a client where I was like, hey, honestly, luckily I was moving. So I was like, hey, I'm actually going to be moving out of state. So I'm going to have you sell the rest of these properties with someone else. But I honestly think that the negativity in those transactions was a huge push for me to just like, I need something new. I'm dumping these and I'm moving to like a new place where I can go meditate in the mountains.
And sometimes that does do that, right? It does cause us to really question and think like, is this the right work? Do I have good enough processes in my business to get results for people? Are there red flags that I didn't see that and here's the thing, when you're newer in a business or you're feeling it, you're in a famine phase, we're probably going to overlook some of those things and be like, I got a little red flag here, but I'm going to take the work.
I got to pay
and
my
that's
mortgage.
okay
Yeah.
because we need to, but then there's a point where we're like, okay, so I actually think that a few grand here or there isn't actually critical. Like perhaps you have profit built up in your bank account, your business bank account, and you're like, I've got rainy day stuff. And you're like, but I have this project I want to work on. And I've got this new like visibility project I want to create. Like I want to create a plan to get on Clubhouse and, make it a series because I kind of need to get my feet wet with it. So it's like that energy. Like if I'm being dragged down by other things, I can't do my leadership things. I can't do my strategic business growth leadership things, which is, I think, what ultimately grows a personal brand business is like you showing up, you creating, you coming up with new ways to teach and inform and transform your clients and not just saying yes to everything. So I think both are okay, but there is a turning point to check in when, how much do you need that money at the end of the year, or how much do you really need to like create? Yeah.
And then how much is that worth to you? Because in that example, I mean, gosh, by the time I had to pay referral commission that for the person who gave me the lead, and I had the discount, I think I got like a third of what I would have gotten on a regular transaction from closing 3. So I worked 3 times as hard to make like a third of what I would have made if I just picked the right client at a higher price point house who wouldn't have been, unpleasant to deal with in a couple of cases. And so that is a perfect example of having that pre-qualification step to have people self-select. If they're not a good fit, if they're not resonating with your message or your pricing, okay, cool. You just saved yourself a 30-minute phone call right there because you didn't have to waste your time for them to find out, oh gosh, this is more than I can afford already.
Right. And then, what are the revenue generating activities that would be you be doing instead? Or how would you even be doing positive mindset work or like things that like a walk in the woods or something for that half an hour, like our time is precious. And I think like, again, we can make lots of mistakes and we can do lots of things and then we learn, but it's a matter of learning. We just have to learn and we have to, I think, hold our ground. And I see that being as one of the most satisfying experiences as we grow in our business. Are we going to do things differently? Are we going to like harness this and go like, you know what? Boundary and just trust it? Or are we going to keep going like, oh, I keep doing this thing? It's like, I don't think we're meant to have like the monkey mind all our life. I think we're meant to like learn and grow and apply. And I think that's how we create change for ourselves. And then the next thing you know, we've shifted our mindset and we're like, totally see things differently and have new capabilities and capacities. And all of a sudden what scared us before doesn't scare us anymore. And we're on to the next thing. And we're just operating at a different level, but we have to act or we don't ever have that experience.
Exactly. It's, I just talked to someone on an earlier podcast. I forget the term he used, but basically you have to take action first. And as you do that, you'll believe a little bit more and you start to see success. And it's like a loop of like, okay, I actually am good at this. You don't start off good, but as you make mistakes and take those clients you shouldn't take, and then you learn to hold your ground and draw boundaries and say, okay, you're not the ideal client. It is super satisfying to turn down business that's not a good fit, by the way. I'm sure we know this now. Many people on the call, maybe you're not there yet, or maybe you are just getting there. It's so satisfying when you know and you define those boundaries for yourself. Hey, you're not a good fit for me, and that's okay. Maybe I'm not a good fit for you. I think you're better off being served by this other person. That way you can truly feel lit up with who you're working with and what you're doing every single day.
Yeah. And that's niching partly too, right? The idea of like picking your lane and nurturing that lane is a short term. Sometimes like it may feel like you're giving up a bit in the short term, but I tell you in the long term, you've really got something that's noticeable.
Exactly. Gosh, so many great things that we've covered. Is there anything else that we've missed or anything you want to dive into? Feel free to add any thoughts to this conversation that you think could be beneficial to the audience.
I mean, I could talk about
this. I know we could talk forever, but I'm just like, what do you want to talk about? I know you've got so much expertise on scaling. I just want to make sure that we extract as much value as possible.
Oh, well, I don't know. I've covered a lot. Again, I just really think it comes down to like core stuff and focus, like focus. It's like someone said, that's the F word of entrepreneurship is focus. Like
that's so true.
putting on the blinders and staying clear and trusting what you know, and not getting caught up by all the bright shiny objects. Like I just do believe our goal is efficiency. I mean it's really fun to look at like the outside business world from like online service providers or, personal brands or local service providers to like what businesses, like larger businesses do. And first of all, they're got efficiency, like their goal is efficiency. It costs less over time to have an input, and that's how they gain profit. And that still has to be our goal. And we still have to think about that. And then even looking at the startup world of, venture capital funded businesses, they have to have a really strong value proposition. They can't just wing it. They have to be clear on what are they doing in the world to be worth this investment? Like what change are they going to make, and how are they going to do it successfully? And so when we look back to like how most of us started our businesses, we're like, oh, I like doing this thing. And it's not really a business. It's kind of just a service. Like a coach, for example, is a service. It's like we're a service provider. We're not a brand that stands for an impact or a shortcut that we can help people take or an outcome we can help people get. And so at some point we need to decide, are we going to be a service provider or are we going to be a business? And a business is like, here's the thing I do. It's like you've got a one sentence elevator pitch or a positioning statement that says that I help people do this. Yeah. And that's where you can grow like a business versus hope to get more referrals like a service provider or somebody who has like hourly appointments. And I'm not saying, again, either is wrong. It's just that it's something to question.
No, that's great.
You do things differently if you want to be a business. You have to take a little bit more risks. You need to narrow a bit more. You need to focus. You need to pay attention to the stats and stuff, like, because you've got to start to invest. It's a bigger game in terms of you may have less money and more time kind of at the beginning, but then that payoff can happen. And that's where we get that lifestyle of freedom. And that's when we get that like abundance, is because we've built something that has this value, and the value is clear and the value can grow. Whereas if we don't build that kind of foundation, then we're just like day in, day out, new appointment.
I love that. I wrote it down. Shift from service provider to business. I mean, a lot of us, me included, right now, I'm kind of in that phase where I'm growing to the business. I'm like, I need an executive assistant. I need a few people to like do this stuff for me that I'm still stuck doing. And so shifting from just providing services, which is an endless hamster wheel of leads, conversions, conversations, sales, to an actual business where, cool, you've got a team doing it for you. You're gone for 2 months and the business is still running. That's a totally different ballgame than I can't go on vacation because if I'm gone, the money stops, right? That's
right.
Like
and the only way you can do that without you being there is that your brand stands for something that's so clear that it attracts people consistently. Otherwise, you're constantly having these individual conversations. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'd much rather people land on my website and be like, I'm ready to buy because I read everything that you said and everything you said is what I want. And then have the people not come than me try to like change my stripes every time I talk to someone. And then there's no referrals, because it's like, how does someone refer something that isn't clear?
That's so true. I love everything we've talked about today. And I've gotten so many nuggets because I'm still in that phase where like, cool, I'm closing deals. Like I mentioned, I have a deal in Houston and I'm hoping that the guy's not upset because he's supposed to close on a house today. And I was like, oh, by the way, I don't go to closings anymore. Like I forgot to tell him up front. So he probably expected to see me at the title company. And I'm like, hopefully, do I send him a review request? Is he going to leave me 5 stars, or is he going to be upset that I like ghosted him at the closing table because my commission check's getting wired to me? So
well, you're transitioning, so you're figuring it out. And it's okay to take those risks. And in this whole transition and this risk, you don't know what you're going to create.
That's
it
what
might
you
be
learn,
something
though.
Totally different.
Exactly. The holes in your process will be revealed. And that's when I know, okay, Chris, step back. These are the things I need to fix. Where are things breaking? Like you said earlier in the funnel, what's not working? Is it, are you not getting traffic, or are you getting traffic and you're not converting them? You can kind of ask that why and start to do the analysis of like, where do we need to focus on next?
Yeah.
So Lots of great stuff, Lisa. Thank you so
Love
much for your time. I know we're at the end of the hour, and I'm not sure if you got another like hard stop or an appointment after this, but is there anything else you'd like to add or a key takeaway that you want the audience to implement today? Focus is one of those things that it sounds like was a key message from today's conversation.
Yeah, I think just thinking about what you want. Are you really trying to be an entrepreneur? Are you really want to be a service provider and just have that go smoothly? Get more clear on the value you stand for in your brand. Like, what is your positioning statement say? And what are you kind of promising? I think, what are you promising everyone?
Yes.
Because I want everyone to be able to say, like, I do this thing for this kind of person or this kind of situation, like whatever it happens to be, own it. And try to put it out there more into the world and not be afraid to not be all things to all people. Really, that's it.
That's the fastest way to not to have to change your stripes every single time. I haven't heard that phrase, but I love that. Having to change your stripes to try to match what the client's wanting. So we don't want to do that. We want to get very laser focused and make sure.
Because you'll start to create repeatable results. And then all of a sudden you're like, I can help you. Like I'm like, for now, for me, for example, I'm so confident in what I offer that I can sell it easily. And if someone doesn't want it, I'd be like, well, that's fine, but here's exactly what I do. And I think you need this, or maybe you don't, or, I'm really clear. So it's like, there's no emotion in it anymore. Not, I should say emotion. Like there's no fear in it for me anymore because I'm so clear on what I do for people that I honestly think they need it or they don't.
And that's what goes to show as well. If you're trying to sell something you don't believe in or you're not good at, it's more difficult than if you actually know what you're doing. So you
might as well get clear on your process, like of getting great results.
And since you can deliver it, you feel super confident and you can more passionately sell it. But where can our audience go to learn more about you, to check out your podcast and just to get plugged into your world, Lisa?
Yeah. Okay. So my website is scalingdeep.com.
Okay.
And my podcast is also Scaling Deep, and that is on my website, pretty easy to find. So those are the places that, come listen if you're a podcast listener. I am on Instagram, just not all the time. No, I am actually. You can see all my mountain vistas because I'm doing a lot of hiking and it's really gorgeous here right now. So that's I'd rather do that and talk about that though than business stuff. No, that's not totally true. But I've got, if you want to take little steps towards either evaluating your marketing or your messaging, which again, I really think is foundational, especially now that people are checking out websites instead of going to networking events as much.
Right.
That I've got that, Brave messaging toolkit and the Scaling Deep marketing roadmap. So I can give you the URLs for those in the show notes, but that's just like Scaling Deep /toolkit and Scaling Deep /roadmap. Those are great tools to start. And if you are willing to work through them, it's a bit of a mind twist sometimes, but it is the work of a business, of a CEO to understand that stuff.
That is the work. You have to do the deep reflection. What do you want? Define it, because that's what results in the business that you want instead of just being in the service provider role that many people get stuck in. So thank you once again, Lisa. I'll be sure to drop all of those in the show notes and I'll share all of this as soon as the episode goes live.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.